Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hi, Kevin here. This week, we're continuing to bring you The Take's Year in Review. 10 episodes looking at the stories that shaped 2025. Today's episode, why are U.S. warships going to Venezuela? This episode first aired on August 28th, 2025. All dates and references are from that time. Today, why are American warships sailing towards Venezuela?
The U.S. is deploying destroyers and thousands of Marines towards Venezuela as President Trump looks to crack down on cartels and the Maduro regime.
With Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro calling on citizens to mobilize to defend the country, what's behind Trump's latest move? I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take.
My name is Alessandro Rampietti. I'm Al Jazeera English correspondent in Colombia, and I'm talking to you from the capital of Colombia, Bogota.
Well, let's start with what's happening right now. Let's just jump right in. As we speak, American warships and thousands of troops are sailing to the southern Caribbean outside of Venezuela.
3 U.S. destroyers carrying Marines are heading in the direction of Venezuela. According to the White House, the mission is to target drug cartels that traffic narcotics to the United States.
What is the official line on this? What is Washington saying?
Well, Washington has said some things, but we don't know everything that's happening and what's the goal, the real goal behind this huge deployment of ships to the Southern Caribbean. We know that it all started with a still secretive directive on part of President Trump, essentially allowing the military and the Navy to start operating against drug cartels in the Caribbean and against a number of criminal organizations that the U.S. is now considering terrorist groups. Among them, this alleged drug trafficking group called the Cartel de los Soles, or Cartel of the Suns, that, according to the U.S., is a major drug cartel operating out of Venezuela that has Venezuelan military and political figures, including the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, as part of it. The issue is we don't know exactly what they will be doing, except for some generalities like intercepting drugs, doing intelligence in the region, but there are no specifics so far. It's also unclear why you need a warship to go after small ships moving cocaine across the Caribbean.
Right. So you said a lot of this is still shrouded in mystery, but we can read into it by looking at the deployment. And this is very serious stuff. I mean, Trump is bringing serious land attack capabilities to this part of the world, isn't he?
Absolutely. We know that there are major warships that are moving towards, we understand, the island of Curacao, which is right in front of the coast of Venezuela. We also know that another island there, Trinidad and Tobago, which is even closer to Venezuela, is also part of this operation. We understand that also at least one nuclear submarine would be involved, and Marines would be part of this operation.
President Trump hasn't ruled out anything, says his spokesperson.
He's prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice.
Trump's relationship with Maduro has been strained since, his first term, and it's only gotten worse in the second, much more belligerent. So they're accusing Maduro really of two things. One, that he's a drug trafficker, and the other is that his government is illegitimate.
The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country.
Now, those are two very different charges. And look, we covered the election here on this podcast.
The opposition accused Maduro of stealing the vote. Very few Latin American countries recognized his win. The EU and the US said opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez was the real winner.
So calling him illegitimate is one thing. But is there any evidence to support Maduro being this involved in the drug trade?
Now, it's complicated. I think we should start by saying that there is enough evidence that there is a large system of corruption inside Venezuela, which is one of the most corrupt countries in the world by all international organizations ranking corruption. There is no doubt that many military officials have been participating or benefiting by the fact that Venezuela has become an important transit nation for cocaine in particular. But so far, there is no smoking gun that there is a mafia organization, a cartel of the type that we think when we think of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico operating out of Venezuela. We know that some high-level officials, political officials, have also been allegedly involved in benefiting from this trafficking inside the country, from the former vice president to the current interior minister, and that the U.S. have accused Maduro of also benefiting from that. But now the U.S. administration have gone further, essentially saying that Maduro could be behind including the flow of fentanyl in the United States. And there is no proof of that. But at the same time, we've seen the U.S. now increasing the bounty on President Nicolas Maduro's head from 25 to 50 million US dollar and portraying him as this sort of mafia leader.
He is one of the largest narco traffickers in the world and a threat to our national security. Therefore, we've doubled his reward to $50 million.
So that's one thing, even if there's not a great proof about that. And then, of course, the U.S. also considers Maduro a dictator at this point. There is no doubt that Venezuela at this point is less than democratic, but there's not a clear connection between the two things, and also no clear evidence that they are operating as a cartel.
So what has been the reaction from Maduro to this military buildup?
Well, Maduro has immediately responded as a threat to his country. He's seeing this as not only as stepping up interdiction of drugs, but a real threat of overtaking his country.
What they're threatening to do against Venezuela, regime change, a military terrorist attack, is immoral, criminal, and illegal.
He has used some very strong words accusing the U.S. of imperial intentions, of wanting to produce regime change through a military intervention in Venezuela. He also announced the deployment of 4.5 million militiamen. These are armed civilians in defense of the socialist revolution in Venezuela that he says would be deployed across the country to defend Venezuela by a possible invasion of the United States. Now, that's obviously a lot of grandstanding because probably these 4.5 million militiamen don't exist. There's probably a smaller number of people that were loyal to the government.
Alessandro, let me just put that in perspective. The largest standing army in the world is China. I think it's 2.2 million. So that would be twice the size of the largest army in the world if he managed to pull that off.
Obviously, and we're used to hearing Maduro making all these great statements that are probably far away from reality. He also announced moving at least 15,000 troops to the border with Colombia. And so far, we haven't seen any evidence of that. And the latest announcement is that he was also deploying his navy to protect his coastlines and drones to do that. However, even if probably these announcements are way bigger than what will happen in reality, all this contributes to increasing tensions in the region and also increasing the possibility that an incident could further complicate things. And obviously here there's a lot of worry of the possibility of any type of military confrontation.
Oh, I'm sure. Neighboring countries are very concerned. Then there's also the opposition in Venezuela or outside of Venezuela. Some of Maduro's opponents sound supportive of Trump's move. And of course, then there's the public. Are we seeing the people mobilizing? Are the people concerned?
Well, let's start with the opposition. I think that there are two main opposition currents inside Venezuela. One is the most right-wing extreme, probably represented by Maria Corina Machado, who hasn't commented on the deployment directly, but has always been very supportive of Trump's actions against Venezuela in past weeks. She applauded the fact that the Trump administration was considering now the Maduro administration essentially as a drug trafficking organizations.
We Venezuelans are deeply grateful to President Trump for his unwavering support to freedom and justice and his decisive actions to dismantle this criminal terrorist enterprise.
So there's no doubt that that section of the opposition supports that, but in Venezuela there's also more centrist opposition, a more pragmatic one, that while they would like to see regime change in the country, do not approve of any foreign intervention and are very worried about this. And I think the same is true when it comes to the people in Venezuela. Though I think it's important to remind our viewers that there is a core of supporters of the Chavista regime in Venezuela that remain there, that still believe in their revolution, and that they will do anything to defend it.
More with Alessandro after the break.
Far out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, Pitcairn Island seemed like an idyllic paradise. But in the late 90s, police officers uncovered a culture of rape and sexual assault against girls as young as 7, and that everyone on the island knew about it. What hope is there for justice in such an isolated place? Hear the full story on True Crime Reports.
So, Alessandro, the Trump administration is seemingly applying two contradictory strategies here. On the one hand, you have this military saber rattling, accusing Maduro of leading narco cartels. And then on the other hand, though, the U.S. is trying to work with Venezuela on repatriating migrants. So how do you make sense of this? Does one hand not know what the other is doing, or is this the art of the deal?
I think it's a little bit of both. Since the start of the Trump administration, we've seen two different policies towards Venezuela working in parallel, and two different sections of the Trump administration having different channels with Venezuela's government and the opposition. On one side, there's Richard Grenell, the Trump special envoy for special missions, who at the end of January traveled to Venezuela, met personally with President Nicolas Maduro, and reached a deal there to release a number of American citizens who were held in Venezuelan prisons in exchange for the return to Venezuelan migrants that the U.S. had sent to a prison in El Salvador. So there was a clear channel of communication that has also then allowed Chevron, US-based oil multinational, to restart operating in Venezuela. The first shipment of oil has reached the US now just weeks ago, was celebrated by Richard Grenell. And at the same time, there's another part of the administration, at the head of which is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, that respond to a section of the right wing in the United States that wants to see regime change in Venezuela no matter what, and who is open to accept any option to do that. And probably these are the people that are behind the deployment of these warships now as a way to pressure the Maduro government into some type of negotiations, or hoping, as they have done in the past, that this might create enough friction inside the Maduro administration or inside the Venezuelan military for something to happen there, or even an internal coup, which is something that both parts of the Venezuelan opposition and the U.S. administration have been hoping for many years now. Now, remember that consecutive U.S. administration have tried to topple Maduro one way or another by supporting the opposition, by supporting extravagant attempted coups in the country. They've essentially tried anything, but nothing has worked so far.
Man, there's so many layers to this one. It sounds like business interests versus political interests are going to collide here at some point. I wonder if the oil interests in Venezuela might actually be the thing that protects Maduro.
This is a situation that, despite sanctions that have been imposed on Venezuelan officials and on the oil business, etc., in general in Venezuela, the truth is that the oil that is produced in Venezuela flows to the United States. So that business is essentially already in many parts controlled by the United States. They are the ones that decide if the oil flows or not. So on one side, that definitely has been protecting the government, but also, obviously, at the same time, the U.S. is trying to stem the flow of migrants to the United States. Millions of Venezuelans fled the economic crisis since 2015, and a lot of it had to do with the loss of revenue in oil for the government of Venezuela. So if you try to strangle economically Venezuela, the result of that is that you're going to see again a flow of people leaving Venezuela and trying to reach the United States.
So do you think that it's possible that this is just carrying a very big stick in order to convince Maduro to take back these migrants?
I think that this is the Trump administration wanting to show they're doing what they can to stop the flow of drugs. They want to show their strength. I think it also reminds the region in general of the U.S. military might. And I also think this is a way to pressure Maduro again, and see if this could do something to produce regime change in the country internally.
Yeah, even the New York Times is asking whether or not this is laying the groundwork for broader military confrontation. In fact, they're even drawing parallels between George H.W. Bush's invasion of Panama when they arrested Manuel Noriega, for all the history buffs out there. What do you think that Trump's goals actually are here?
I think it's too early to definitively know right now. I think, as we said here earlier, there are tensions and differences inside the Trump administration. I think that Trump is trying many different things at the same time and see what sticks in a way. I don't think that this can turn into a military intervention, but it might signal to parts of the Venezuelan military that they have the backing of the United States if they want to attempt something. There is no doubt that if you send major warships to an area with the history that we have in South America of U.S. intervention, you mentioned Panama, where we could go back to Chile, Grenada, Haiti in 1994. There's no doubt that this creates a lot of worry and reminds these countries of a different times that people thought were now behind when it comes to these kind of sort of neocolonial interventions, and reminds a lot of countries of things that have happened in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know which would be worse, regime change coming back or a real escalation of the war on drugs. And as we wrap up, let's focus on that part, because it is worth continuing to have this historical context to this conversation. The U.S., as you mentioned, has intervened in Latin America for decades in the name of fighting drugs and cartels. And those operations have coincided with rising violence, displacement of civilians, and they have not, obviously, eliminated the illicit drug trade. So do you worry that the Trump administration is looking over the shattered wreckage of the so-called war on drugs and saying, more of this, please. We want more of this. Is that what people are bracing for?
I think that that's a real possibility and a worrisome one. At the same time, I think it's important to remember that if that is the case, Venezuela is not the best country to do that. Because while Transparency International, for example, among other groups, say that drug trafficking through Venezuela is worth billions of dollars, at the same time, Venezuela is not the main producer of cocaine or fentanyl. Those are other countries. Those are Mexico and Colombia. And also, while a lot of drugs go through Venezuela, it's not the main channel through which drugs reach the United States and Europe. The main routes are through Ecuador and Colombia, through the Pacific, to Mexico, and then to the US, and the other one through the Amazon, Brazil, and from Brazil to Europe. So I think that, again, what's happening here, while it's being presented as trying to stop the drug cartels, goes beyond that. It has to do with the geopolitics and has to do with the fact that I think Venezuela is an easy one to show some force without having to risk too much, whatever the results will be in the end.
Wow. So it sounds like the rhetoric is right out of the war on drugs, but the tactics might be closer to that old regime change strategy.
Absolutely. And I think it also falls into the category of these unorthodox way that we're seeing from the Trump administration, and the same way in which he is using the National Guard inside the country and cities to fight crime. He now wants to do the same with the Navy and show that he's doing things differently, that he shows this mighty force. But then we don't know what it can achieve in reality. However, we can expect more interdiction throughout the Caribbean. Other countries are also saying that they're willing to participate. France, for example, other Caribbean countries. So we're going to have to see how it all plays out. And at the same time, the effect that this can have on Venezuela and the politics inside the country.
Okay. Alessandro, thank you so much for coming on The Take today.
It's been a pleasure. Anytime.
And that's The Take. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to give it a like so more people can find the episode. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know what stood out to you, or if there's anything you'd like us to dive deeper into next time. I'm always checking in, so keep the conversation going. See you tomorrow.